He can pardon anybody for any reason he wants to, corrupt purpose or no, and he can direct the investigation or non-investigation of any person, corrupt motive or no. You don't put discretionary limits on plenary constitutional authority, and if you do, what you do is you invite Article 3, non-elected, politically non-accountable judges to second-guess the president's authority. You never want to have a constitutional regime that sets up that way. We, the people, can either not vote the president in the next election, or we can impeach him. Those are our political pushback mechanisms.
Did I tell you, or did I tell you? Elizabeth Price Foley taking down this whole obstruction of justice nonsense. But the host on MSDNC, Yasmin Vaghela, should have known better, because the professor, the good professor, the amazingly intelligent Elizabeth Price Foley, had just come off of the destruction, that's the only way I can describe it, of one CNN senior legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, right on the heels of the Comey hearing. I'm going to be interrupting this one for my own little bit of commentary and fun, but just listen and enjoy.
The White House today basically saying today was a good day for the president, was it?
I think it was a good day for the president. I think that James Comey came across as sort of a quintessential Washington insider who simultaneously sort of manages to be Machiavellian and spineless at the same time. There were moments where he admitted that he wasn't standing up and giving the proper advice to the president. He was also verifying that a lot of things the president said were true. I think also, interestingly, he also confirmed in my mind, which I believed all along, that there was no obstruction of justice here. There's simply no legal case to be made for that.
All right, so that's just the setup. We're going to fast forward ahead right now to get to this idiot Jeffrey Toobin, who hasn't been right in his analysis ever, really. Let's fast forward to him and just the epic beatdown.
The president certainly has the authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to appoint this person with the advice and consent of the Senate. He can fire him at any time for any reason whatsoever. He can certainly demand his loyalty. In fact, I think it's normal for a president to demand loyalty from all of his subordinates.
Do you really think he has the right to fire him for any reason whatsoever?
Oh, absolutely.
He says, if you don't give me $100,000, I can fire you, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a crime there that can be investigated.
I don't want any Catholics in my administration, so
yes.
I'm firing you. That's okay.
Yes, because there's two separate questions here.
And then Jeffrey Toobin learned, you don't mess with my new hero, baby.
No, there's two separate legal questions here. One, can the president constitutionally fire the person? The answer to that is always yes, regardless of the circumstances, even if he thinks he smells bad, right? Number two is if the president does fire him and engages in that sort of behavior, and we have evidence of that beyond a reasonable doubt, that could constitute a separate crime. And then the question becomes legally, can you prosecute a sitting president? I think that's legally ambiguous, but could that evidence amount to a high crime and misdemeanor under Article 2 to suffice for impeachment? I think the answer to that is clearer, and the answer would probably be yes.
We disagree profoundly about this, and I think the examples I gave are indicative of how serious what's going on here is. If there are crimes committed between the Attorney General, between the Director of the FBI and the President, you bet
what
that
crime?
Is obstruction of justice.
All right, explain to me how it's obstruction of justice.
It's very similar to 1972 in the same Oval Office where
what's the matter, Jeffrey? Are you tripping over your words because you know you're going down a rabbit hole that you can't get yourself out of? Let's see what happens.
President said there is a pending investigation of his former national security advisor, and he says, let him go. Let him go. That's the use of the FBI for political purposes, and it's unlawful, and it should be prosecuted and investigated.
Here's the professor in me coming out.
Okay.
There are two sets of statutes under the U.S. Code, under Title 18. Mm-hmm. They deal with obstruction of pending proceedings and obstruction of investigations.
Correct.
There's only one obstruction of investigation statute that would be arguably applicable. That's Section 1510 of Title 18 of USC. That basically requires that there be an act of bribery that prevents a communication to a criminal investigator about a crime. You would agree that neither one of those elements have been satisfied?
Correct.
Okay. So then we move on to pending proceedings, obstruction of justice statutes.
That's the relevant one.
That's correct. There's 1510 and there's 1512. Both have pending proceedings language in them. Pending proceedings is a legal term of art. It's defined in Section 1515.
Right.
And a pending proceeding is a judicial or quasi-judicial proceeding in which, for example, quasi-judicial would be an administrative agency that has subpoena power, enforcement power. The FBI does not have subpoena power, so it does not qualify. Every single court that has been asked the question, does an FBI investigation constitute a pending proceeding under the obstruction statutes, has answered the question no, including the Ninth Circuit, the most liberal court in the country, in 2013.
Correct.
And that's what you call getting wrecked legal style. Now, Toobin goes on to say, because there was a grand jury investigation pending at the time of the communication, it's kind of a backdoor way into the obstruction of justice statute. Not true, because as Professor Elizabeth Price Foley pointed out, the FBI does not qualify as an agency that fits within the definition for the statute's purposes, and therefore is not obstruction of justice. Can we please put this aside already? We have just about enough time for a final thought here on the show. I want to thank you guys for listening to this week's show. Check us out, as always, at www.behindenemylines.radio.us. But for this week's final thought, I'm going to relate it back to last week's show and make it a little personal, because there's now news breaking. And I can't believe I didn't get a chance to ask her this, but there is news coming out of the great state of Tennessee that our friend Scotty Hughes, who was on the show last week, may be looking at a possible congressional bid in 2018, depending upon what Congresswoman Diane Black does, whether she runs for governor or not. Well, let me just say this. Scotty, if you're listening, if you choose to go for this, I'm on the first bus to Tennessee. I hate flying. I'm on the first bus to Tennessee to your district to start stumping, because I'll run through a brick wall to get you to Congress. That would be so awesome to hear and to see and do. Obviously, long way to go between now and 2018 and that election cycle. Let's get through this election cycle here in the People's Republic of New York. And, my goodness, wouldn't that be an amazing race to be a part of? Oh, I hope it happens. But until then, and until next week, it's time to shut this show down. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I want to thank my new hero, my new crush, my new legal crush, Professor Elizabeth Foley. My God, I can't believe that epic takedown. It's so great to see these thoughts getting out there. But until next week, I'm going to revel in this moment and in the news overload that's going on that we've been talking about. But I'm going to do it by shutting this sucker down and seeing what comes at us. I'm so excited I can't even talk. Seeing what comes at us next week. Behind Enemy Lines. We are out of here. Good night, folks. Our position has been compromised. It's time to roll out. Report for debriefing at www.behindenemylinesradio.us and look for regular communications via Facebook and Twitter at BEL_radio. You are the resistance. Behind Enemy Lines. A Rock Radio production. Copyright 2016. Back in 7 days. Out.